I'm Robyn. And I want to tell you a little bit about myself and a little bit about my background so you know why we're here and how I got to this point and why you're here with me, okay? So I started out as a high school English teacher. I taught 11th and 12th grade English, and in particular, I taught 11th grade on level, 11th grade honors, 12th grade on level, and then I eventually started an AP program in my school. When I started, I was a decent teacher. By the time I was finished teaching, I'd become a really good teacher and seen some really good results with my kids, to the point where my administrator tapped me to share some of the techniques and strategies with other teachers. And so I really struggled with that at first because I'd figured things out for myself, but I wasn't sure how to share it with other people. And what I realized very quickly was I couldn't just talk about what I did in my classroom because those things worked for me. I had to understand why did those things work for me, because there were principles involved. And so the more I started thinking about what are the principles that make this stuff work, the further away I got from strategies, and the more I started talking about the bigger principles that undergird it. Well, over the years, I figured out what those principles were, and that became one of the first books I wrote, which is Never Work Harder Than Your Students and Other Principles of Great Teaching. And it's really about the principles for why things work in the classroom and what are those. And I found that there were really just 7 simple principles. And those 7 simple principles can explain everything that's happening in a classroom. They can help you figure out or repair a lesson that's not working. Those 7 principles can help you diagnose what's not working and how to fix it. Those 7 principles tell me what I need to be doing as a teacher in order to be effective. And so that became kind of my focus. Again, not strategies, really principles. Well, like, the Peter principle, everybody rises to the level of their incompetence. The first thing they did, I was effective in the classroom, so they took me out of the classroom, and then I began to coach. And I negotiated at first that I would coach for half a day. So I was an instructional coach in the building for half a day. And the second half of the day I could teach because I still wanted to teach. But eventually the district came back and said, nope, you're done. And they made me an assistant principal at a middle school. And I struggled as an administrator when I first became an administrator, not because I wasn't good at the job. I learned the job pretty quickly. I struggled internally because I was used to being in a classroom where I kind of had my kids and I could do what I wanted. And then now I don't have my own classroom. I don't have my kids. I go into other people's classrooms and I see them doing things and I want to get up and say, stop, no, stop, right now, just stop, don't do that. Because I could see people making mistakes in the classroom and I felt powerless to do anything about it. Or I'd go into a really great classroom and at the end of the day I'd say, oh man, I wish I could go back to teaching. That was an awesome lesson. I was learning a lot about teaching and felt really powerless to kind of implement it because, anybody ever feel that way? Like you wish you could go back in the classroom now knowing what you know? Yeah, I felt that way a lot. I felt jealousy and envy of the teachers. The other thing was I didn't like the fact that I did not have any control over my day. I didn't like the fact that when I walked in the building in the morning with a plan, anybody could come and just, take over my plan. But the real hard part for me was that when I went into classrooms and when I met with teachers, I'd get this wall. I'd get compliance. I'd be giving them feedback and they would just say, okay. And I could tell that the moment they left that office, they weren't going to do anything I told them to do. I'd spend hours doing these post-observation write-ups and agonizing over exactly what to say and planning that conversation. And did you ever take that class where they taught you how to script the questions? Like, yeah, okay, so I took that class, and how might you, and I wonder about, and, trying to find the magic words to say that would get people to actually respond to my feedback. You know what? It got to a tipping point one day when I gave a teacher who was actually a pretty good teacher, and I gave her feedback according to my instrument. And, I was using that hamburger. Do you know the hamburger approach where you say something nice, and then you have to find something negative to say, and then you end up with something nice? Well, she was a great teacher, so finding something negative to say was really difficult. So I remember saying something like, you might want to use more high contrast markers on your whiteboard because the kids in the back might not be, I mean, it was something, I didn't say that, but it was something almost as silly because I was just looking for something to say. And she looked at me and she said, really? Really, Robyn? And I mean, I'm standing there and I'm trying to stand behind my thing, but you know, I felt like she did. I'm saying the same thing. Really, Robyn? This is what it's come to? And when she walked out of my office, she took the feedback that I'd given her, she threw it in the trash, right in the main office. I came by later on to scrape out my lunch plate and went over to the trash can and I said, oh, that's my evaluation, that's my write-up. And nobody wants to find their feedback in the trash, but that happened to me. And that's when I realized, you know what, I got another problem. You see, the things that work, people used to like working with me when I was an instructional coach. You know, I could add value to their classroom. So why is it that now that I'm an administrator, nobody wants to hear what I have to say? And then I realized the problem was the perception of power. It wasn't my magic words or asking the right question or, you know, cozying up to teachers and developing relationships. No matter how much I did that, at the end of the day, as a coach, I didn't have the power to hire or fire. But as an administrator, I did. And people saw that perception of power and they felt that perception of power and it made a difference in how they responded to my feedback. So I had to figure out something else. And over the next couple of years, the answer came to me, but it came gradually. I'd learned something else. So the first thing I learned was, okay, we need 4 different types of feedback. We give feedback to people targeted at their needs. Then they're going to be responding better. And I saw a little traction there. And then I figured out will drivers, and will drivers was a huge game changer because now I could, if I understood your will driver, I could understand what's going on, what motivates you. I can give you feedback in that kind of language, and that's going to change things. So I figured a couple of things out. We figured out the transformation cycle. We figured out all this other stuff. But there was one thing that was missing. There was still, even when people went to this training, they went back and they tried it to say, oh, success, success, success. And then I'd hear, uh-oh, it didn't work this time. Now what? And I didn't have an answer for them. And so I had to figure it out. And one day, I was doing something that had nothing to do with leadership and feedback, you know, and the training that I do. It was about the power of story. And then I realized, you know what, that's the secret to why some people are responding to your feedback, Robyn, and other people are not responding. You see, I thought the problem was that I needed better feedback. If I just found the magic words to say, then people would respond. So I went on a search looking for what are the magic words. Well, that didn't work, and so I said, what are the magic structures? Well, that worked a little bit. Then I went to what are the principles? That worked pretty well, but there was still this thing missing. And the problem was even deeper than that, because the problem was I wanted to help these people. I wanted to make a difference in their practice, and more importantly, I wanted to make a difference in the lives of the kids I served. Because your feedback is the difference between a kid having a good year and a bad year. Sometimes your feedback is the difference between a kid learning something and a kid not learning something. So I knew that this was important and I couldn't figure it out. And then I realized the missing link. It had to do with the power of story. Now, you know, hear me out a little bit. You see, we talk about stories all the time. I talk about storytelling. Last year at Leadership Lab, we actually had one of our most powerful sessions where we told our own leadership story. And we're actually going to have an opportunity to do that again. But the real reason some people accept or reject your feedback has to do not with your story. It has to do with the story that they are telling themselves. You see, everybody is telling themselves a story. Right now, you are telling yourself a story. And guess what? You're the hero in your story. And you're on a quest. And you have obstacles. And you are slaying dragons and overcoming those obstacles. And you're moving towards a goal. And that plays out as a story in your head. Think about it. As human beings, from the beginning of time, we have tried to process our existence, our experience through stories. And so right now, everybody is in the process of telling themselves a story and living out a story. And the problem with our feedback, the reason that a lot of people they miss out on feedback is because we don't understand the power of a story. So we talked about it. People process the world through story. Everybody's telling themselves a story. And you must enter into the story people are already telling themselves if you want to impact their practice.